You know who the Pacers remind me of? They remind me of the Grizzlies during the early to mid 2010s, that era with Zach Randolph, Gasol, Conley, and Tony Allen. Right now, and in recent years, the Pacers have always struck me as a team similar to them. Bottom 10 in pace, defensive-minded, a great front-court duo, overall, a more team-oriented approach, with everyone getting a slice of the pie. The Pacers have been winning nearly 50 games in recent seasons. Like the Grizzlies of the past, they're seen as a dark-horse contender. A wild-card team who could give some teams a run for their money, but not necessarily a legitimate threat to win the title. When we look at a team like the Sixers or the Bucks or Celtics or Nets, they look like championship contenders. They have that it factor. But when we look at the Pacers, it's like, yeah, they're a great, solid team, but they don't have that oomph. They're missing that extra firepower. They're missing a superstar who they can rely on. They simply can't make me believe they could actually compete for the title. Since 2016 and up until the day of this video, they've lost in the first round of the playoffs for 5 consecutive years. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today let's talk about the Indiana Pacers, a team that's not well covered compared to other great teams. They're certainly a playoff caliber team, a young playoff team, but they've been stuck in the same place for a while. What are the problems, and is there a solution to fix them? First, let's go back and take a look at the recent series of events the Pacers went through to give you guys some context on their current situation. Starting from 2015. This was the year Paul George returned from a gruesome injury, but at this stage, the Pacers were no longer the same team they once were. David West was gone, Roy Hibbert rapidly dropped off and got traded prior to the season. This was essentially Paul George surrounded by a bunch of role players, plenty of young players too, as the Pacers began a new era. It was kind of a transition period, but in the long term, they knew he probably wasn't gonna stay. So they were more focused on rebuilding the team and gathering assets and young prospects. 2 years of this led to back-to-back first-round exits, although the Pacers were pretty close to knocking out the Raptors. By the 2017 offseason, George was gone, but it was also a blessing in disguise. He didn't want to be there anymore, and it was clear from his body language he wanted out. At least the Pacers got something back. It worked out well, but looking at it in hindsight, maybe they could have gotten more, considering that the Thunder got so much more when they traded away Paul George to the Clippers. This new post-George era started in the 2017-18 season, where the Pacers impressed everybody. The trade was initially seen as a negative for Indiana, but it was the perfect opportunity for Oladipo and Sabonis. They absolutely balled out, especially the 25-year-old Oladipo. He had a career season, becoming a first-time All-Star. The Pacers managed to pull out 48 wins, a really big surprise, considering most preseason predictions had them struggling to even make the playoffs. Not only that, but the team impressed in the playoffs too, pushing the Cavs to 7 games. As a result, the Pacers became a team that everyone paid close attention to. They were put in the same category as the Sixers and the Celtics, a rising young squad that's only going to get better. Unfortunately, over the next few years, the Pacers stagnated. Everything went downhill after Oladipo suffered a ruptured quadricep tendon in the following season. This was the key factor that turned everything backwards. It was an injury that took over a year for him to return. Even worse, by the time he returned, he played for a month before COVID suspended the season for months. It was a tumultuous time for him, and while his injury didn't get much coverage, as, with the Pacers being a small market team, people forgot about them for a few years. There were questions surrounding Oladipo's injury as well, because sitting out for over a year is uncommon for an injury like this. According to an interview, Oladipo stated, "I really want to play, and as a competitor and teammate, this is tearing me apart. I just can't get my mind to being fully comfortable in playing." I have to be smart, and this decision hasn't been easy, but I truly believe continuing on the course I'm on and getting fully healthy for the 2020-21 season is the right decision for me. During his absence, the team continued to play well in the regular season, making the playoffs as a middle seed. But they got swept twice, once in 2019 and again in 2020. Oladipo returned for the latter half of 2020 in the NBA bubble at Disney World. But when he got back, even after a year of recovery, he struggled a lot. He didn't look anywhere close to his former self. It also didn't help that Sabonis was injured too, so right when Oladipo came back, their other star gets hurt. It was such bad luck, and once again, the Pacers got bounced in the first round. This left the team in a predicament. On one hand, Oladipo was still a star player recovering from injury, and he should be fine once he gets back into shape. On the other hand, Oladipo was looking for an extension, but the Pacers were hesitant on giving him one due to the uncertainty of the injury. This was the biggest question. Eventually, the Pacers did in fact offer Oladipo the maximum extension he could get. According to Ryan McDonough, he reported, the extension would have started in the mid-$20 million range, in the $25 million range, and gone up 8% a year. That's the most the Pacers can do under the rules. Oladipo turned down that extension. Yikes. The reason for him turning it down is because he could get more money in free agency in the summer of 2021, so he wanted to wait. Unfortunately, the Pacers had different ideas. They knew Oladipo could make far more money in free agency, but they didn't want to pay him upwards of $30 million a year, especially since they still had concerns over his quad injury and whether he'd return back to form. But they also didn't want to risk him walking away for nothing, so they traded him for Caris LeVert. This looked to be a good return for Oladipo considering they didn't have much leverage. But unfortunately, LeVert was diagnosed with a small mass in his kidney. He was forced to undergo cancer surgery, but thankfully he's on the road to recovery. This leads us to where we are today. The Pacers are now led by Malcolm Brogdon and Domantas Sabonis, the primary options who've made drastic jumps to get to where they are. Miles Turner has been there for a while and has been a consistent contributor, but he also made a noticeable jump. Along with some other role players, they're trying to fill in the void that Oladipo left. So let's take a look at how they're doing so far. Let's crunch down some numbers. Despite being a top 6 defensive team in the last 2 seasons, they're now hovering in the middle of the pack. Not too bad, but not exceptional either. Looking deeper, you could see their struggles. So far in the 2021 season, they're allowing their opponents to hit 39% of their threes. They're one of the worst teams at defending the three-point line. According to the NBA.com stats dashboard, they just aren't contesting as many shots as they used to. They're bottom 10 in contesting threes and bottom 10 in contesting shots overall, and also near the bottom in charges drawn. This means on defense, they just aren't getting to their spots fast enough. They aren't hustling enough, so they aren't getting there on time to contest the shots or draw a charge. These are all better indicators of how they're doing on defense than a simple rating, and from the looks of it, it hasn't been good. On the flip side, offensively, the Pacers themselves are bottom 10 in three-point percentage. There was a notable drop-off after the Oladipo trade, and this was a side effect of losing him. Despite his faults, Oladipo sucked in the defense every time he drove to the basket, and created a lot of space for their shooters on the perimeter. Now, Brogdon has taken on a bigger role and tried to fill in the gap, but he's not the same level of threat as Oladipo. Defensively, that's where the main drop-off happened, but offensively, they've gotten slightly better, presumably from the increased ball movement. The Pacers are currently top 5 in total team assists per game, and the scoring has been spread out more evenly. 7 different players are averaging at least 10 points per game, which is good. It's good to have a balanced offense. But to be honest, they're just an average team with average players. If you told someone that Malcolm Brogdon was the leading scorer of a team, you'd probably think the team is tanking. The Pacers aren't that bad, and I love Brogdon, but there's no way a Brogdon-led team would get that far in the playoffs. Let's be real here. So what can they do? Well, there's not much they can do. They already fired Nate McMillan, who wasn't very popular with the fans, but with their new coach, Nate Bjorkgren, this is his first time as a head coach, so he's still learning on the fly. Unfortunately, the Pacers aren't exactly a prime destination for free agents, so they have to rely on internal growth. This puts them in a weird spot because they're too good to be a lottery team, but not good enough to actually compete for the title. This means they aren't getting a super high draft pick either, so it's hard to rebuild in this position. Plus, just by glancing at their roster, from my perspective, they're already overachieving in the regular season. I'm not sure what the ceiling of this team is, but it's pretty damn low, nowhere close to the other contenders of the East. They have to slowly rely on internal development and hope that their young players make the jump, cause I doubt any marquee players would sign there. It's the age-old dilemma of being a small market team being stuck in no man's land, basically treading water until they find that spark. The bad luck with injuries also hurt them too. If not for that, maybe Oladipo's progression would be different. Perhaps he might still be there, if so. Anyway, that's all folks. Let me know your thoughts on the Pacers. They're without a doubt a great team, but their potential is severely limited. What do you think they should do from here? Do you see a potential player breaking out and making that leap into superstardom? Sabonis maybe? Also, do you think they'll make any trades in the near future? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.